Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I continue to talk on this text, opening the hand of thought. This morning, I'm going to talk on two paragraphs on page 133. Third paragraph, starting, usually we do not understand. Okay. Usually we do not understand these circumstances of the present moment as the scenery that unfolds within the universal self. Instead, we analyze this now. We place ourselves within the elusive flow of time from past to future and become bound by our relationships with others, bound by the force of habit of the past, and bound by our goals for the future. Being totally tied up, we are dragged around by the expectations of our small egos and end up floundering in desperation. When we see everything as the scenery and circumstances of the here and now, how do we function as universal self within this moment? Through the life circumstances of this self that is at once our personal self and the whole self of the universe. We act in a lively and vivid way by giving life to the past in terms of our own wealth of experiences and by responding to directions toward the future. In these two paragraphs, he kind of comparing two different attitudes toward our life, scenery of our life. Now, Uchiyama Ro is discussing, first he discussed about the magnanimous mind or big mind without any discrimination. And he is going to talk about the second of the three minds, or sanshin, that is a nurturing mind. And to connect between magnanimous mind, beyond discrimination, and nurturing mind, the mind to take care of children or everyone around us. He discussed even we let go of thought and being free from any discrimination, still each moment we have scenery of our life. And sometimes, as I talked about Uchiyama Ro's very painful experience when he had injured in his toe and he couldn't do anything. He didn't have money to go to a doctor, so only thing he could do is just stay there by himself. And he said, because of the pain, he couldn't even sleep for 3 days and 3 nights. And he said that was very meaningful, important experience for himself. He experienced a kind of a release from anxiety by just being there, here and now with the pain, without thinking any kind of sequence about what he did in the past and what happened for him in the future. We have such a very painful scenery, but often, well, normally our scenery is not so dramatic. So in certain each moment we have some scenery and there is some difficulty and some negative element, but also there are some positive element, and there are some choice we have to or we can make. So we have to think. And in these paragraphs, he's talking about it. There are two possible attitudes within such a situation. The first one is, I think these two are kind of applying the Buddhist teaching of Four Noble Truths. So Uchiyama Ro applied the teaching of Four Noble Truths, and he discussed very kind of concrete example how Four Noble Truths could be understood and practiced within our actual life. So I try to explain what are the Four Noble Truths. I'm pretty sure all of you already know. Four Noble Truths are suffering and cause of suffering, and that suffering is first and cause of suffering is second truth, and third truth is cessation of suffering, and fourth is the way leading cessation, leading to the cessation of suffering. And what he is talking in the first paragraph is this, suffering and cause of suffering. And in the second paragraph, he is talking about cessation of suffering and the way leading to the cessation of suffering. And in Buddhist teaching, that is Eightfold Noble Path. That is the right or correct thinking or thought, shoken, shoshi, no, is correct view. I don't remember in English. I can remember in Japanese. Shoken, shoshi, shogo, shojin, shonen and shoujo, shonen and shoujo. Right view, right thinking, and right speech, and right livelihood, and right effort, and meditation, and wisdom. Right? No. So nen is mindfulness, and jo is meditation, or samadhi. So what he is, and another important teaching that is helpful to understand the very basic structure of Buddhist teaching is Four Dharma Seals. When I explain very basic form or teaching of Buddhism to people who don't know Buddhism so much yet, I kind of combine Four Noble Truths and Four Dharma Seals. And Four Dharma Seals is everything is impermanent. I think you already know. And second is everything is selfless, or anatman, or no substance. And the third is suffering. Everything is suffering. And the fourth is nirvana. And I usually talk first two, I mean impermanence and no self, or anatman. And that is the way things are as a reality of our life. Not everything is changing, that is impermanence. And therefore there's no fixed self or substance that can existing without relation with others. Since everything is changing, the things around us change, we have to change. So these two are not two separate things, this is one thing. And if we don't understand or see these two reality of life, then everything we do becomes suffering. And when we clearly and deeply see or directly see impermanence and no self, then it's clear that we cannot cling to the self because this is empty. So we open our hand and doing things without clinging to these five skandhas. Then the fourth truth is nirvana. Nirvana is what? It's something like tranquility or peacefulness. When we combine these two set of teachings, what Four Noble Truth is saying is the suffering. If we don't see the true reality of our life, then we cling to ourselves, then we do things, then our life, everything in our life becomes suffering. And this everything includes really everything. That means we know, there are negative things and positive things, and joyful things and not joyful things, or happiness or unhappiness. Or sometimes we have a very good time and we feel like we are heavenly beings, and the other times we feel we are like hell dwellers, because things are impermanent, changing. We change and we transmigrate. Within this transmigration, even these positive experiences is a part of suffering. If there are two kind of dichotomies, then we have no choice. Then we don't worry. There's no way to worry or to make choice, because there are two things, and it seems I can make choice. Or when I do something, we can get good thing, and we can stay away from negative things. Then we start to chasing after things we want and escape from the things we don't want. So this dichotomy is a problem. It's if only the happiness or only unhappiness, then we can even think about it. There is alternative. Then we don't transmigrate. So when we don't see the true reality of our things, our life, and based on our desire to fulfill, to satisfy, this five skandhas, then everything becomes suffering. And when we see impermanence and no self, so we become free from clinging to the self. Clinging is upadana. That means when we see emptiness of five skandhas, and we try not to follow our personal desire to fulfill our person, to make our five skandhas in a good, happy conditions. Then we can find a very stable, peaceful way of life. And what Four Noble Truths is saying is the cause of suffering is delusion, or three poisonous mind based on delusion. Delusion or ignorance is one of the three poisonous mind. So when we don't see this truth, reality, we have greed or anger or hatred, and those are based on ignorance. But when we see emptiness and no self, and we practice Eightfold Noble Path, then this practice leads us to the cessation of suffering. That is a very basic, I think, structure of Buddhist teaching. And this basic structure is the same in any tradition of Buddhism. And what Uchiyama Ro is saying here is in our very concrete day-to-day lives, each moment or each time we have different scenery. And depending upon our attitude toward those scenery, our life becomes suffering or nirvana. So in the first paragraph, Uchiyama Ro says, usually we don't understand these circumstances of the present moment as a scenery that unfolds within the universal self. That means we think our five skandhas, this personal, individual body and mind, is the subject, and everything others are object. So we always think what is a good things and what is not good things, positive and negative, and what I can use to make me happy, or what I have to avoid not to make me unhappy. And we don't see that we are not separate from these things happening, but we are right within this interconnectedness. That is, I think, that is the difference. So we don't see things, and from one perspective, this individual person named Shohaku is a very tiny part of this interconnectedness. But because this Shohaku is zero, as I always say, then this entirety is Shohaku. But usually we don't see in that way. But we see, I have a desire to fulfill, and I think I evaluate things which can I use to make me happy, and which I have to avoid to not to make me unhappy. So we make choice depending on whether some things are helpful to make me happy or not happy. To do so, he said, we analyze this now. this now means this scenery of here and now. We analyze. Analyze is a word in this translation, but original word Uchiyama Rō use is humbetsu. Both hum and bet means to separate good thing and bad thing. Usually this humbetsu is translated as discrimination, making distinction and think good and bad, valuable or not valuable, or useful or not useful. That kind of humbetsu. We make discrimination, distinction, what is good and what is not, which makes me happy, which does not make me happy. Then we place ourselves within the elusive flow of time, from past to future. At the same time, I think we kind of make a story. Within time, flow of time, this is present, and there are past and future. And we think why I am here, and we make a story from the past, and what I should do to kind of realize, actualize my desire. And within this story, the hero or heroine is always me, and we want to make this entire story happy ending. Even though past there's nothing good, but something we want to become happy. How can we make this happy ending? Make this story happy ending? And we, as I think, we think something can be useful to make this story happy ending, or something we have to avoid to do so. That is how we analyze and make distinction or discrimination. Something good I can use, and things which is not good, so we should keep away. So we place ourselves within the elusive flow of time. Actually, in Uchiyama Ro's original Japanese sentence, there's no word elusive, but time is time or history or story in which we are a hero or heroine. This is not the time as it is, or the things as it is. There are, even when I think of these 5 skandhas, there's not only cause and result, and cause and result, single flow, and kind of a one way. But within this entirety of interdependent origination, there are many different, cause and result that makes these 5 skandhas as Shohaku, who is living at the Sanshinji in Bloomington. But somehow I kind of select what is most important things in the past. And for me, when I became his disciple, Uchiyama Rō asked me to speak English. that is the beginning, that is the first mistake that makes my life suffering very difficult. That is how I make a history or a story of my life. And to do so, therefore I have to move to this country, and I have to somehow speak about Dharma in English, very poor English. Therefore, my life become very poor. If I stay in Japan and study Buddhism and Dogen only in Japanese and explain only to Japanese people, then I think my life is much easier and peaceful. So anyway, that is how we make the story or history. What was most important, and what is the place I want to go. But about the future, also there are many different causes and conditions which makes my future. So actually, there are numberless of cause and result within the past, and numberless element of cause and result for the future. But still, I think, this is how I came here, and this is where I want to go. This makes our life meaningful. So it's okay. But often this is a cause of the problems because we don't see other, numberless elements and numberless elements in here. Usually for example, I go to Y, or every day I can, to make the condition of my body and mind in a good shape. But it's possible, when I'm walking to Y, I could be hit by a car. So I don't think such a things happening in the future, but it might be possible. But when I think about my future, I don't think such things, such unexpected or accidental things. So if such things happen, then I really feel impermanence. Anyway, so important point is, this is how we live, using our intellectual thinking or our brain. But important things is, this is not really a reality itself, but this is the story I made to make me a kind of a comfortable. And in a sense, I just justify what I'm doing, or why I'm here. And I want to make it meaningful what I'm doing, thinking about some desirable future. And that is okay, whether it's okay or not okay, that is how we live within using our mind. But if we think this is only reality of our life, then I think everything becomes suffering. Because there are so many things happening against my expectation, or so many things that I can even imagine or dream may happen, even today or tomorrow. Here we are. Our illusory flow of time from past to future, and become bound by our relationship with others. So in this present situation, I have a relation with other people, I live in this small town, within this small community of Sanshinji. There are not so many difficult relations. People come to this temple are all interested in Buddhism or practice. So all people in this community are supportive from my point of view. So I really appreciate it. But if I think this situation that people in this community are all supportive to me, and I think this is never changed, then that becomes delusion. So we have to be flexible and let go. Otherwise, if someone started to do things different from what I'm thinking, then, or something against my idea, then I feel they are bad, or they don't understand me, and I start to suffer. But if I see that is my understanding, but that situation might be changed. So we need to see it really impermanence, not only as a Buddhist teaching, but as the reality within our day-to-day lives. So about the relation with others, and bound, we become bound by the force of habit of the past. In the past, I have some experience, some kind of a successful experience, and some not so successful experience. And I think the things I did and that was successful, that should continue the same thing. So I should continue doing this. And this can be a delusion. Things are changing. And bound by our goals for the future. So far my goals in my future is retirement within 3.5 years. Within 3.5 years I want to complete this talking on this text. This section is only a few more pages, and the final part 8, entitled The Way Seeker, is the record of Uchiyama Ro, his last lecture at Antaiji, right before he retired. So I think this is a good material to talk before my retirement. So my expectation is before 2023, hopefully in June, I want to finish this talking about this text. Maybe it's possible, but we don't know. But when we think I should do this, and if I cannot do it, then I feel, my plan was a failure. But if I think I wish to do so, but it may not possible, then it's not a big problem. My retirement is not such a big deal, but I think now, the current president of this country, this kind of things might be a really big thing, not only for him, but for all people in this country. So we have to really be careful about how we see the current present situation, and what is our expectation, and how we can reach that goal. And yet it might be, the result might be very different. and yet we have to make choice what we can do or what we should do to actualize the desirable for a better future. That is what he's talking in the next paragraph. But usually what we think is based on my personal desire, how I can be happy. So we are bound by that kind of idea about the past and idea about the present and desire for the future. We become bound and we lose freedom. Therefore, he said, being totally tied up with these memory and desire. Being totally tied up, we are dragged around by the expectations of our small egos and end up floundering in desperation. So we even think this life is not worth to live. This is a right world, or this is very degenerate age, and we become depressed, and we lose energy to do even a positive thing, and we stop making effort, and that makes our life suffering. And in the next paragraph, he says, when we see things as the scenery and circumstances of the here and now, how do we function as universal self within this moment? Universal self, as I always say, I'm not only individual person, only this small 5 skandhas, but these 5 skandhas are making with all different elements, and those elements are still coming and going. Physical and mental elements are really changing, and that change came from this relation or interconnectedness with others. So this is only 5 skandhas I can live, but this 5 skandhas is not my personal possession, but this is supported by all beings, by all entirety of this interconnectedness. So not only thinking how I can be happy, even I have to use other people or things as the kind of a material to make me happy. We can think of how this entire situation make even a little bit better. We cannot do as a person. We cannot offer so much, contribute so much things. But each person can do might be small, but that small things can be effective to make this entire situation even a little bit better. So we try to think what is the best things we can offer, instead of how can I use other beings make me this person happy. That are the, I think, difference. So when we see everything as a scenery and circumstances of the here and now, how do we function as universal self within this moment? Not only to satisfy my personal desire, but how can we make this entire network even a little bit better? Through the life circumstances of this self that is at once our personal self and the whole self of the universe. So we are the kind of intersection of personal self or karmic self, individual self, and this five skandhas that is connect with an entirety of this network. Uchiyama Ro only says two sides, one and infinity. But between these two, I think to see, emptiness or zeroness of this individual being, I think is helpful to understand what Uchiyama Ro is talking about. He only talks about this karmic individual self and so-called universal self. But to see the universal self, we need to see the emptiness of the self. There's no such thing called a self. Then we start to see connection with others. So to see this zeroness, I think is important. We act in a lively and vivid way by giving life to the past in terms of our own wealth of experiences. So our past experiences can be a teacher, and by responding to direction toward the future, how can make this entirety of network even better or healthier, good for not only for me but with all beings. I think that is the meaning of taking Bodhisattva vows. Then our personal difficulty is really difficult and sometimes painful and sad, but that has something as a teacher. Then what can I do? Or even, this is the end of the year, and I already think about next year, and my plan for next year. Then I have a fear that if I can do all those things already planned, but somehow I can do my best. That's all I need to do, and from my experience in the past, how much I can do with this current condition of body and mind, and what is the best things I can offer to other people from my past and present experiences as an example to other people. Then kind of in a sense, declining life force can be useful and meaningful. I think that is what Uchiyama Ro did after he retired from Antaiji. He said his practice or his work before retirement was teaching his disciples and produce the next generation of Zen practitioners. But when he retired, that is what he said in the final section of this book, to just see what is happening, what is going on in his body and mind in this period of declining. And he said, I want to report how the aging can be as a final part of Buddhist practice. So, aging and dying is, most important part of suffering, or samsara, ending the last part of samsara. But he lived in his life after he became a monk as a Buddhist practitioner. Then as a Buddhist teaching, what is how we can understand the process of aging and what is going on, and how we can be, even though we are aging and dying, but how can we be free from aging and dying, or free from suffering of aging and dying? So he said, retirement, to retire and stop working in the social stage. Still, his practice as a retired person, very quiet, and only thing he did was taking care of his body and mind. And he wrote about what's happening in his aging body and mind. And as much as he could, he gave lectures. He gave lectures, I think, until he was, I think, almost 80. But at one point he said, that's enough. So he quit. And he really just be himself. So, Dogen died too young. He cannot be a role model of me after I became 70. His teaching was only for kind of young people, because he never had experience to live with, aging body. So, to me, Uchiyama Ro's teaching, or what he wrote after he became a retired person, is really important and precious. Anyway, that is what I think he's writing in these two paragraphs. And within the same situation, we can take two kind of opposite attitude toward the situation of our life. And that is, according to Uchiyama, that is what Buddha taught in the teaching of Four Noble Truths. If we live with a certain attitude, with a kind of egocentric story, then our life becomes suffering. We lose everything we, achieved and earned. But another attitude is, Eightfold Noble Path. That attitude, important thing is what I can offer to others. Then I don't need to worry about my personal profit so much. I think that is what he is saying in these two paragraphs. And in the next paragraph, he actually talks about the nurturing mind, nurturing or parental mind. So when we live with that attitude, the main thing is our parental mind, that what can I offer, how can we help other people or things or this entire situation, and think other people are my children, as Shakyamuni said in the Lotus Sutra. Well, that is what I have to say this morning. Any question or comment, please?
So when you were describing Uchiyama's retirement and talking about old age and death,
mm-hmm.
It reminded me of the words from the Heart Sutra: no old age and death, and no end to old age and death.
Yeah.
It's so, in a sense, it seems as though maybe he was studying the matter of form and emptiness, or the two sides of.
Oh yes. Yeah.
I think it's very,
You know, one of the probably the last poem in his the collection of his poem Life and Death, he said, though poor never poor, though sick never sick, though aging never aging, and though dying never dying. So these two is two sides of form and emptiness, I think. And that is almost his conclusion, or about his insight about this Dharma means this life, his life.
did he write those poems during retirement?
Yeah. He wrote those poems around the time, around when he was 70 years old. He retired when he was 63, so 7 years after his retirement. And around that time, we expect he was really dying. He had almost always had health problems, and often he could cancel his lecture. So we expect he was dying, and probably he also expected his death. He was dying, and so he wrote these poems really for himself. He said, if he became really sick, even he couldn't think about such things. So before he became too weak or too bad, too sick, he wanted to make his understanding clear about life and death. So this is not his idea, but his, how can I say, came out of his actual life.
So those poems, in a sense, were a form of his reporting on that experience at the end of life.
Yeah, also a kind of conclusion of his practice, study and practice of Dharma. For maybe about more than 50 years, I think. Please.
Your talk, at times it reminded me of this story by Camus, The Myth of Sisyphus. Are you familiar with it?
Camus.
Yeah, he's a French, early 20th century philosopher.
Existentialist.
Camus.
Yes, yeah. So this, story, he basically says that, his philosophy is kind of that life is fundamentally absurd, and so we are searching for meaning, but there's no meaning to be found. And so he says we kind of have two choices. We can either kill ourselves because life is absurd, or we can embrace the absurdity and strive for meaning, even though we'll never find it. And to me, it's sort of similar to this idea of like this absurdity is sort of like seeing emptiness, I think, but not really knowing what to do with it. But then his conclusion that we need to continue searching for meaning is sort of like, setting ourselves in time with goals and aspirations and vows is maybe sort of similar to what he's saying.
Searching the meaning is the meaning of life. Probably. Yeah, I think so.
So do you think there's sort of similarities between these ideas, or they?
I think so. He studied Western philosophy when he was a university student, and he mainly studied what his name? I forget. German philosopher.
Heidegger or somebody like that.
Hegel. But if he continued to study Western philosophy, probably he became an existentialist. But he stopped and became Buddhist. Okay, anything else, please?
As a follow-up, I never really understood Camus because one of the things he did was, in the end, it's absurd, but he would always find, he found hope in society and the interrelationships with that. So there wasn't an inevitable moral nihilism. Didn't understand how we got to that though. Kind of in a philosophical bent, I'm in a quandary here. And it's kind of stuck in discriminating mind. We're impermanent. Because we're impermanent, we have no self. What we are, who we are, is, not necessarily the five skandhas, but all the causes and conditions around that. In essence, the true Dharma is that we're the universal self. Being that universal self at this moment, instead of being the subject-object distinction. My quandary is, if we are impermanent and are nothing other than our causes and conditions around us, doesn't that make our understanding impermanent and nothing other than the causes and conditions around us? Such that I'm only a Buddhist because I come here, I sit here. If I did not come here, if I did not sit here, I wouldn't be a Buddhist. It's the causes and conditions that brought me here to do this. Given all of that, how can I know the true reality beyond the impermanence?
How can we know the reality beyond the impermanence?
Yes, because we're impermanent. We suffer because we're impermanent, but it seems like that there's a knowledge beyond that we can't explain, and that we're trying to get at, that we can't get at with words. And it seems that if I am nothing but impermanence, it seems like there's a piece of knowledge that I will never be able to get, that I will never be able to understand.
I don't understand it. Yes, I think that is why it's beyond our understanding.
This could be an example of what you said before, that if we don't have choices too, there's only one thing, there's no problem, no suffering. So if that's all you're left with, don't suffer. There's no alternative. The alternative, there is no alternative. I mean, I'm going along with the setup here. There's just one possibility. Then what's this, you live with it, more or less. I mean, I'd be a little, flip here, flippant, but if you take this format that Oku-san is describing, the problem comes from, there must be an answer, but I can't get it. But if there is no answer...
Yeah, I think that is how our brain works, our way of thinking. Even when we say impermanent or impermanence, impermanence is a negation of permanence. So in order to think about impermanence, we need to understand what permanence is. Otherwise, impermanence doesn't make any sense. So as a kind of a basic nature of our thinking is dualistic. So there's no way we can see the reality beyond this reality, or this reality beyond duality. Even when we say reality beyond duality is a negation of duality. So whatever we say or whatever we think using words and concept, it's dualistic. So when we think duality cannot be a reality, duality cannot be reality, then we think we need to go beyond duality. But that kind of wish or desire is based on the duality. I don't like this, so I want to go beyond this. Somehow we need to stop that kind of going beyond things. And that, I think that is in Dogen's or more common than expression returning to the marketplace. There's no way try to go beyond this dualistic way of thinking. So somehow we return to this, reality in which we suffer. Does it make sense, please?
I wonder if the notion that nothing is hidden is maybe useful, like, maybe, it's better to think that there is nothing beyond impermanence, and this is where we find our peace, is within this world of impermanence, and nothing is hidden from us here. There's nothing to go beyond to. You already have everything you need here. I wonder if that makes sense.
Or is your question about, because this human form is impermanent, how is awakening possible? Is your question about the limitation of this human form?
It kind of seems to be that in that bent. It seems to be that given the human form, given our causes and conditions, our understanding is tied to our causes and conditions. Therefore, we can't really understand anything.
Yeah. So it's like, how do we transcend the limitations of this human form such that awakening is possible?
Correct. Because because honestly, I've been on record many times to say I have no idea why I'm here, but there seems to be something here. So it's, for me being here, present, donating my time and everything that I am to Buddhism, I don't think of it as something empty. I don't think of it as something that's just being here.
Probably that is called bodhicitta.
So
Or in Uchiyama Ro's expression, life force. Somehow life force, like sunflower always turning to the sun. So somehow our life has needs something, or looking for something that can support our way of life. But if we think about what is the life force, what is the bodhicitta, we again get into the jungle of dualistic thinking.
Yeah, when I think about it, I end up thinking about Camus. Yeah.
But I think
Probably that's why we can open our hand.
yeah, I mean, I think that what you were describing, it sort of sounds like, the mind's ability to understand things is impermanent. But I think that this practice is not about grasping at some particular understanding. It's about letting go of all of these various understandings that we think we have, but they're all ultimately kind of unreliable. So, I mean, to me, it seems like it's in letting go of that attempt altogether that, we sort of find this practice.
And that's why it is a practice. It's because we're constantly letting go.
Yeah, and isn't one of the prominent teachings, the mind cannot be grasped? I mean, the ungraspability of the mind and life.
Okay.
I just
More
one
discussion?
thing. I mean, besides this, for one thing, you can work with this. Like the talk today had a lot of useful stuff, like we're bound by past, thoughts and this and that. For example, in the question, why are you here and this and that, but you might just as well say, why is anything here? That would open up the scale. It would include you, but it takes the pressure off you. I mean, why are you here? It's like, why is anybody here? Why is, this and that? The other thing is, grammatically, in English anyway, unfortunately, we talk about discrimination, and then we have to discriminate. But with your translation, or rather pointing out the Japanese, it's not simply discrimination between a cat and a dog or an apple. It has to do back again with ego. It has to do, what value do I put on that? Not simply, is this different from that, but this is valuable, this is meaningless. Get rid of it. And in my experience, in English, I'm not primed to automatically load up discrimination. Unless we have adjectives. That's a beautiful glass. Okay, then it's loaded. But glass, that's not loaded, no problem. So, but unfortunately, with these translations, they talk about discrimination, like all discrimination, but what you explained this morning, it's not all discrimination. It's discrimination that feeds back immediately to watashi.
Yeah, I think English,
what me.
not English, but Buddhist term discrimination, funbetsu. Within the funbetsu, there is already subject who is making that discrimination. And that subject, the person has a yardstick. And this yardstick is whether is this good for me or not.
So that's just, I think, I don't know what other people think, but in general, we're not, discrimination is not a bad thing. But where it gets unhealthy is discrimination in terms of this one only. And otherwise we dismiss it. So that's unfortunate. I don't know how to get around it. I don't know a better word that doesn't do this.
It's the difference between labeling and judging, or making a distinction and making a discrimination.
Yeah, but label is one thing and judging another.
Exactly.
So, I mean, you have to, when I'm looking for what label to stand in line for another label, and if there isn't any, then recognize it. Anyway, thanks for the time. Great talk.
Okay, thank you. Merry Christmas.